We begin today in Syria, where airstrikes Wednesday killed at least 22 people, most of them school children. The attacks occurred in a village in Syria's rebel-held Idlib province. According to reports by the Syrian civil defense rescue workers, the raids were carried out by either Syrian or Russian warplanes and hit a residential area and a school.
Oh God, oh God, God, please help us. Oh God, you are seeing our situation.
I want my mother. Take me to my mother.
The plane hit us. I do not want to go to the school.
Also on Wednesday, United Nations Aid Chief Stephen O'Brien addressed the Security Council, saying the Council has taken no action to end nearly 6 years of civil war in Syria. His comments sparked an angry exchange.
Each month I have come before you and presented an ever-worsening record of destruction and atrocity, grimly cataloguing the systematic destruction of a country and its people. While my job is to relay to you the facts, I cannot help but be incandescent with rage. Month after month, worse and worse, and nothing is actually happening to stop the war, stop the suffering.
Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, responded to O'Brien, describing his remarks as arrogant and criticizing him for not talking about Russia halting airstrikes in Aleppo. Several council members, including the United States, France and Britain, defended O'Brien's statements. This is U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power.
What is so remarkable and troubling about the presentation we've heard today is that what Russia really wants from the UN is credit. Congratulations, Russia, you've stopped for a couple days from using incendiary weapons. Thank you for not using cluster bombs in civilian areas. Thank you for staying the hand of brutality with regard to bunker buster weapons. You don't get congratulations and get credit for not committing war crimes for a day or a week.
This comes as U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced a military campaign to retake the Syrian city of Raqqa from the Islamic State. Carter said the campaign will commence sometime in the next few weeks before the likely completion of the current offensive to defeat militants in the Iraqi stronghold of Mosul. Meanwhile, Syria continues to dominate foreign policy discussions in the presidential race. Donald Trump warned in an interview Tuesday that Hillary Clinton's policy on Syria could lead to World War III.
Well, she has no plan for Syria, and look, with her, you'll end up in World War III. She doesn't know what she's doing, just like with Libya, just like with everything else she's done. So Syria now is no longer Syria. Syria is Russia and the new Iran that we built through the Iran deal, which is one of the worst negotiated deals I've ever seen.
NATO is seeking to station more troops in Eastern Europe in what's been described as the biggest military buildup on Russia's border since the Cold War. As part of a U.S.-backed plan, NATO is planning to send battle groups to Poland, Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia, with forces ranging from armoured infantry to drones. As tension mounts between Russia and the U.S. over the crisis in Syria, National Intelligence Director James Clapper said Tuesday he fears Russia could shoot down a U.S. aircraft if a no-fly zone were to be imposed over Syria.
Well, our first guest says that two mutually exclusive competing narratives are dominating discussions around Syria, and neither is sufficient to understand what's happening in the country. In a new article in The Nation headlined, "The debate over Syria has reached a dead end," Bassam Haddad writes, quote, "There has been increasing gravitation toward two mutually exclusive narratives, A, that of pure and consistent revolution, and B, that of external conspiracy. Both narratives carry grains of truth, but both are cumbered by maximalist claims and fundamental blind spots that forfeit any common ground necessary for enduring ceasefires or potential transitions, as well as post-war reconciliation, he writes. Bassam Haddad is the director of the Middle East and Islamic Studies program at George Mason University and is director of the Arab Studies Institute. We welcome you to Democracy Now! So why don't you lay out what these competing narratives are and why you call this a dead end at this point?
Thank you, Amy, for having me again on the show. I simply was trying to establish some sort of accountability on behalf of the people that push certain arguments or narratives on both of these sort of dominant sides. What I call the pure revolution narrative is, of course, some sort of a shortcut to a much more complex position. Both of these depictions are, but in all cases, it represents a view that assumes that from the very beginning of the uprising or revolution, the same values that actually existed at the time have been sustained throughout the last 5.5 years by the rebels and so on. Whereas in reality, the actual uprising has been transformed into what we are seeing today to avoid the nomenclature of what is exactly happening today in terms of giving it a name. And that also reveals another shortcoming regarding the actual, of course, external intervention on behalf of the opposition that has short-circuited the opposition, that has rendered it less unified, less transparent, less inclusive, and most detrimentally, less independent. They also have a problem, the proponents of a pure revolution narrative, in trying to disentangle the good rebels from the bad rebels, if you will, or the jihadists from the nationalists within the rebel groups. But it is extremely difficult to disentangle these two, as it is extremely difficult to disentangle Syria today from the problems that we are witnessing in the region. On the other side, we also see a dominant narrative, and of course there are many other narratives, but these are the ones that you are always confronted with when you talk to anybody about Syria, whether it's a family member, a policy analyst, or a friend. The other narrative focuses on a conspiracy excessively, focuses on external designs on Syria excessively, as if there is no reason for Syrians to actually rise up on their own and basically struggle for ending a 4-decade repressive regime, not just politically, but also economically. And it does this at the expense of Syrians because it sees external imperialist forces, which do exist and have actually wreaked havoc in the region to the nth degree, but it only sees those forces, and internally it sees, for the most part, jihadists. And what disappears in this narrative are ordinary Syrians that are actually opposed to both. Syrians in this narrative become invisible. And if you try to hold a position that rejects this sort of pure revolution narrative, which is unrealistic and difficult to accept when you are looking on what's happening on the ground, or when you try to reject the conspiracy or external designs narratives, you are basically accused of being either a traitor to the nation or an imperialist or even a jihadist. And you're not allowed to oppose the regime, for instance, from a perspective that is different from that of the opposition. And you're not allowed to be in the opposition to the regime without being labeled a pro-West, pro-US, a pro-imperialist a speaker or advocate. And that puts us in a situation that prevents the development of a middle ground that, as cliche as it sounds, that puts Syria first over and above all these designs. What is at stake here is not what is happening now, because the regime, as we see it today and as we saw it in the past several decades, is not going to be part of Syria's future, no matter how much everyone insists on that side that it will be. It's actually, for the most part, a bargaining chip to use during negotiations to increase the leverage of that side of the argument. What might stay with us, however, is the new configurations that we are witnessing developing in Syria, including various groups that are externally supported and funded. These kinds of movements, in my view, will stay with us for the long haul. And this is why there's a lot of controversy about what should not be controversial, which is a democratic uprising against a dictatorship. But things have become so complex that to actually rid the real world of this complexity and just focus on the ideals is actually counterproductive for the purposes of an uprising itself.
Bassam Haddad, there's so much to discuss. We're going to break and then come back to this, Director of the Middle East and Islamic Studies program at George Mason University. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.